anything like me, you more than likely have been gaming for over a decade and most of your life at large, ever evolving with the times and getting the newest consoles when you could, or just upgrading your PC on occasion. All the same, as time has gone on, there's a handful of games that caught your eye along the way, but you never got to for one reason or another. I know for me there's a handful of games, both past and present, that seem right up my alley, but I skipped them altogether for one reason or another myself. Perhaps it was the price never coming down to the point where you wanted to buy it, or in some cases even going up. I'm looking at you, Nintendo, and some of your Pokemon games, literally any of them. Or something like RimWorld, that seems like a great experience I can sink hundreds of hours into without buying a single DLC for it, which I've heard are also incredibly well made, or something like Factorio as well, and so on. There's of course games that just sort of get lost to time. They catch your eye when you first see the trailer, then you add it to the wish list, and then boom, you forget about it. One day you realize it got delayed and then released without you ever knowing. Once you find it again though, you either buy it on sale or it just stays in the wish list to be forgotten about once again. I know for me these games were originally Red Lantern, Really Accurate Battle Simulator, and Zero Ranger. Though in my case I did play Tabs and Zero Ranger already, though I didn't complete either one of them. But I have yet to touch Red Lantern just by owning it for over a year now. Do you want to know why? It's a fear any longtime gamer has. The fear of game you've long waited to play just isn't any good. When we hear about new games and see their first trailers, we immediately jump to conclusions on what the combat might be like or how the story may go, possibly dissecting the trailer or looking on YouTube for any news or clues about what will happen in the game, and so on. Our imaginations run wild with just how good the game could be. It's childish wonder all over again. Every game is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece that we've never seen before, or it's the game in a series we love that brings it to new heights and it improves upon everything and blah 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 blah. Because every game is a masterpiece until it comes out. There are a few things worse than buying a game and it being nothing short of a letdown. We've all experienced this before. Gaming has a long history of games failing to meet expectations and in general just being less than what we expected to be. Sometimes it's the fault of the developers, or at least the people who advertise the games. Take Bethesda for example, Fallout 76 and Starfield. Look how they were originally perceived by the public at launch. Low-hanging fruit, I know. Then of course there's the ones that we all know, like Dead Island, Watch Dogs, Mass Effect Andromeda, The Division, and so on. This happens constantly among major AAA games, and it's usually a fault of the publisher trying to hype the game up beyond what they should, but of course they're supposed to. But finding that thin line between how much you should hype a game up and how much you're exaggerating is a thin line to walk. On the rare occasion you will have a dev or team lead come out and say things or make promises about gameplay features that simply aren't true, or they aren't nearly as fleshed out as they claim to be, like No Man's Sky, Fable, and Cyberpunk. On occasion it also happens with an indie game as well. Either the trailers make the game look far better than the game could have possibly been, or maybe the concept just sounds funner on paper than the actual game turns out to be. Something like Dave the Diver, Superliminal, and for me, Red Lantern. Regardless of how or why a game turned out to be a disappointment, they're not all equally disappointing. Sometimes the game just ends on a cliffhanger that never gets resolved. The ending could simply just be disappointing as it makes the whole journey feel invalidated. Maybe certain gameplay mechanics aren't nearly as fleshed out as you wanted them to be. On occasion the game will start by throwing everything it has at you within the first hour or two, and then the rest of the game feels shallow as progression hits a wall. Or on the other end, you're drip-fed new gameplay elements so slowly, it feels like there isn't much there at all. Sometimes the game requires such a hefty amount of grinding to unlock all the cool gadgets or abilities that by the time you get there, you kind of feel burnt out, or you become so OP that by getting them, it kind of nullifies the joy of actually finally unlocking them. Whatever the case may be, it doesn't take a lot for a game to go from most anticipated game of the year to just another dud that wasn't worth the wait. But no matter how we got there, all roads lead back to one thing: expectations. And as someone once told me, disappointment cannot exist without expectations. But then who do we blame when a game doesn't live up to what we imagine in our heads, or what the developers/publishers promised us? Where do we go when we have an itch for something that just doesn't exist? Do you remember the last game that made you feel disappointed? Can you remember why? Who was at fault? Well, I have a different question for you. What do you do when you have expectations so high for a game that you're afraid to even start it? I imagine most of you have a game or two that immediately comes to mind for one reason or another. Maybe the reviews on the Steam page lie at mixed, or your favorite YouTuber gaming channel said they weren't a fan. Maybe you heard the ending isn't good, or that it drags on needlessly. Maybe it's a game that ends a series that you're just not ready to part ways with. Or it's a game that requires so much time and effort, you worry about starting at the wrong time and not being able to fully enjoy it. The difficulty perhaps is off-putting as you're more of a casual gamer. Maybe turn-based combat isn't your thing, but you heard the story is really good. Maybe you don't feel comfortable jumping into a game that's a sequel to a long-running series. There's a lot of reasons we put off games. And even more excuses on why we pick to start different games over the ones that we want to start when the opportunity does come around. Whatever the case may be, we're all still guilty of it. So what about me? What game have I been putting off? Kind of a personal question, don't you think? You could at least take me to dinner first before we decide to get so intimate. But I guess I'll just have to wait for now. How's about I tell you what it is without actually telling you? I'm sure you'll be able to guess it by the end of this. Since the 360 days, I've always enjoyed playing hard games. I've always enjoyed the challenge. I think it's part of the reason why I've always enjoyed multiplayer games. I think having to deal with incompetent teammates or just having to do 1v1s in games like Mortal Kombat have always just kind of thrilled me. Even nowadays, I can hop onto any multiplayer game and just dominate for the most part. From Marvel Rivals to Chivalry 2, Call of Duty, Rainbow Six Siege, Battlefield, PUBG, and so on. Maybe not Valorant or CSGO, but you guys get the picture. With single player games, I've always chosen to play on hard difficulty or higher, as I've always enjoyed the challenge. Souls-like games on the other hand don't have a difficulty modes, and they never will. That's how it should be. So then, when I'm presented with the fact that my ability to progress will be locked behind beating a certain boss, it's a daunting task to ask before I even start. Now you might say, well, just about all games have boss battles, what's the difference? And while yes, that's true, most games let you turn down the difficulty if you need to, or they just blatantly help you surpass the boss after a certain amount of failed attempts. Take Another Crap's Treasure. I actually got decently far in this one until I got to the squid boss. When I tell you I spent 2 hours fighting him and only managed to get a fraction of his health down, I really do mean it. 2 hours of time just wasted with no clear progress being made. Up to that point in the game, I think I rarely ever tried parrying anyone, as it wasn't necessary. I didn't want to risk being hit due to poor timing, so I'd always just jump out of the way. But this boss requires you to parry. If you don't, the window to hit him is so small and will require so much time and hundreds of dodges to beat him without it. So I tried figuring it out on the fly, and I felt like I hit a dead end. I just couldn't get the timing down, and even when I did, I couldn't do it often enough. I kept getting killed. So what did I do? Well, I did what cowards do. I cheated. Technically. You see, your armor in this game is based around what kind of shell you're wearing, and you get certain abilities because of it. Whether it be a tennis ball, a shot glass, and so on. You can also go into the settings and just equip a fucking gun as a shell and just essentially one-tap enemies. So I did that. I finally, quote-unquote, beat him. So I moved on to the next section, which was frankly incredibly annoying as there's toxic goo everywhere, and the game throws multiple enemies at you at once. And if you know anything about Souls-like games, know that fighting more than one enemy at a time isn't easy. The games aren't really built around doing so, but they still do it anyways. After about an hour of failing to clear the section and unable to get to the next bonfire, I just sat there on the couch and felt dissatisfied with myself. Not because I was stuck again. I knew I could get past this part. It was just more so a thing of how long I'd be there. It was the fact that I hadn't earned being there. I hadn't earned being stuck in this spot now. Everything I had done up to that point in the game, I did without exploits or cheats. I just put my head down and grinded. Took a lot of dying, of course, but I figured it out eventually. That feeling of anguish being released little by little every time after beating a boss that I couldn't beat the first 10, 20 times around. But this time it wasn't there. I felt a little empty. I just didn't want to play anymore. And then I take a look at a game like Cuphead. A game that received its own fair share of criticism for being pretty hard. A game I've beaten twice now. Once on Xbox, once on Steam. But the second time around felt worse. Like for some reason I couldn't play as well this time. The beat boss was annoying, but didn't take too long. I felt like I took longer on the pirate ship dude and the roller coaster / train guy. And then of course there's Mr. Dice, and the devil himself. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, I fucking hate this stupid dragon bot. Oh my! So for those who don't know, you have to play a sort of roulette game in order to fight the sub-bosses that you need to face before even facing Mr. Dice. You have to do it all in one life, mind you, and how many you face is completely based on where you land with the dice. Mind you, Mr. Dice is pretty challenging himself. Also, a side note for this, I only just found out that you can actually cheese him. I found that out while making this video. I kind of wish I would have known that before. I would have definitely cheesed him because he was pissing me off so bad. So depending on what you roll, it'll either make it easier or harder on you. And of course the devil himself just sucks to fight. I spent a literal 3 hours straight after work one morning just trying to beat him. I didn't feel any sense of enjoyment or accomplishment or anything like that when I beat him. I just felt pissed because of how long it took me and how many close calls and unexpected changes in his inputs had prevented me from beating him earlier. But all the same, I did eventually beat them both and have a sort of rare achievement to show for it. And then I started playing the DLC and gave up on the third boss. Do you think you know what game I'm afraid to try yet? Well, how about I throw you a curveball real quick? Remember how I said I don't play Souls-likes? Well, I think I said that anyways. I lied. Sorta. There is one that I did beat, and I really did have fun playing it. Funnily enough, it's one of the least player-friendly ones out there. It came out in 2017, has an average rating of 73 on Metacritic by the critics, and a 6.6 user score. I personally give it an 8 though. It's The Surge. Yeah, I bet you didn't see that one coming. I actually beat it back in December of 2023, The game does a terrible job of properly directing the player anywhere, and for whatever reason there's these two very specific enemies that are posted up in random spots that behave nothing like the others and have incredibly hard to read attacks that combo into one another, making fighting them something I actively avoided doing. I spent hours lost in the third region of the game because I couldn't figure out where to go, so I had to look it up. There's a hole in the ground surrounded by toxic goo and it's guarded by two of these incredibly annoying enemies that I mentioned. How would I even see that? Why would I even go there, like willingly into this dark alleyway that has nothing but toxic goo, guarded by these two cybernetic dogs that are extremely annoying to fight? Like, what kind of game design is this? Besides that one major issue, for the rest of the game, you can make your way to wherever you need to go without much issue. According to howlongtobeat.com, the average player takes about 21 to 29 hours to beat, depending on if you do side quests or not. Which, side note, they are also incredibly obtuse and terrible at telling you where to go, and in the end, it took me over 40 hours to beat. And I think I spent 5 of those alone on the second to last boss. I'm not going to get into the details about it, but I will just say this. It took me less than 10 tries to beat the final boss, less than 10. So like 30 minutes once I figured out the moveset. The Warden took me an actual 5 hours to beat, probably even longer. This is why I don't play Souls games. It's also why I've yet to start Elden Ring. Yeah, I guess it's probably no surprise that I wasn't in fact talking about a Souls game. Not gonna lie, I do feel kind of guilty about having still not touched this, as my girlfriend bought it for me last Christmas, and while I know she doesn't care about when I get to it or whatever, as she doesn't pay any mind to what I play, I still don't feel great about it. But as you might be aware, Elden Ring is the first true open world game in the mainline Souls series, which opened it up to a broader audience while still retaining the feel and difficulty FromSoft is known for. You may have also heard about just how bullshit some of its bosses and enemies are, alongside a late game difficulty spike that some have put as puts you back to level 1. There's a million different things that can be said about the game, from its terrain, boss battles, how some players feel the game discourages you from having wacky builds, and so on. Add on to that, at any point in time, I could simply be locked out of progressing from the game, all due to the inability to beat a certain boss or clear a certain section. It makes me scared to even download the game, let alone start it, no matter how much I might really enjoy it. Souls games aside and the difficulty they bring, there's a lot of games out there that anyone could get excited for after seeing the first trailer, hearing about it on a gaming YouTube channel, or anything else. There's a lot of games out there that, while it might seem like it'd be right up your alley, there's a lot of them as well that just simply aren't for you. Having to figure out which is honestly very hard for most people, I imagine. No one likes the idea of buying a game, going home, and then figuring out that they really just aren't into it. I imagine many of you, even as a child, probably went to GameStop at some point, bought a game because you thought it sounded cool. Maybe you saw the cover art or something like that, and of course you stick it in your Game Boy, your DS, whatever the case may be, and the game just isn't at all what you expected. For me, it actually was GTA Chinatown Wars. Granted, I did come to love that game as time went on, but when I first popped it in and started playing it, even my dad looked at me, he was like, "Is that not what you wanted?" But I couldn't look him in the eyes and tell him, no, it's not what I wanted. I think because at the time I still had my PSP, so when I played Liberty City Stories, I then expected the same thing on the DS. Probably not a good idea. So then going from that to then that on the DS, yeah, it took me a while to get into it, but trust me, I do generally love the game now. There's 3 other games I want to talk about today, but they don't require as much in-depth of a breakdown as the last one, so let's do a simple one. Something that's sort of off the wall, that being Pizza Tower. So Pizza Tower is an extremely stylish 2D platformer inspired by games like WarioWare. It's crude, fast-paced, ridiculous in concept, and looks like a great time. So what's the catch? I'm not gonna lie, this one is pretty simple. It's just a personal taste kind of thing. I was looking at this game, it's sort of just like an eyesore. Like, the raunchiness of it all is just super off-putting while also extremely appealing, looking in both its humor and its gameplay. Aside from that, 2D platformers are sort of just not my thing, and they haven't been since like the NES, like the original Super Mario game. I generally can't remember the last one I picked up, let alone finished, but hey, that's just a me thing. Maybe by playing Pizza Tower, it might inspire me to play games like Ori and the Will of the Wisps or something. Next up, we have Monster Hunter World / Rise. Now, Monster Hunter is a bit of an odd franchise to talk about because if you talk to older fans of the series, they'll tell you how much the game has changed and all the new ways that they've messed up the game, especially looking at something like Monster Hunter Wild, which no one seemed to like, whether it's casual fans or longtime fans, which in large part seems to be due to the fact that they're trying to increase the player base by streamlining a lot of the systems that were previously more complex and nuanced, and some players argue have just made the game a lot more simplified in a worse way. Mind you, Monster Hunter World came out in 2018 to not only critical but also sales number success-wise. Now you have games like Monster Hunter Wilds, which seemingly no one liked, whether casual fans or long-term fans, as the Steam reviews currently sit at mixed, and all the recent ones sit at mostly negative. Meanwhile, Worlds and Rise both still sit at mostly positive. I understand Steam reviews aren't everything, so take that with a grain of salt. So what's the deal with these two then? Well, I guess this would probably be the best jumping off point for getting into these games, but for me, the way I look at them is that they're just another iteration of Souls-like games. I mean, you're using giant bows and swords to beat up dinosaurs that you're hunting down for whatever reason. I don't know the context behind these games. The few clips I have seen in this game make it seem like it's something that I really enjoy, but then I also hear about how you have to sharpen your sword in the middle of combat to make sure you're doing enough damage, and it should go without saying that can go really wrong really quickly. So then I think of things like that and I'm like, yeah, I don't know if this is for me. Then you take into consideration the fact that these monsters are so big that if they have wings, they can flap them hard enough at you to launch tornadoes at you, and then that being as big as they are, they also have the potential to one or two tap you. Again, just sounds like another Souls-like to me. Or we can talk about the fact that fighting just one of these monsters can take 20 minutes or up to an hour, if not longer, depending on how well you are not prepared. Which, speaking of which, these games, to my understanding, have a very complex system in regards to how you're supposed to strategize, things you're supposed to collect, traps, overall how these monsters fight, different instincts that they have, move sets, and so on. Like, there's a whole book, an encyclopedia really, for every single monster and how the game expects you to strategize before you even attempt to go after them. And while of course all this is optional all the way, the game is literally telling you this is the best way to do it, so that way it's the least amount of headache. So having to do all these things and prepare in these ways and blah 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 blah, if I had to follow an instruction manual to fight a monster in this game, I feel like it's kind of already off-putting to begin with, but I don't know, maybe that's just me. Hey, what do I know? I've only ever seen things online, read about it, watched videos about it, so on and so forth, so I could be 100% wrong, though I don't really know why I'd be so misinformed. So you guys let me know. Last up now, I want to talk about a game that most of you probably never heard of, and if you have heard of it, you probably don't think you're going to have fun with it. It's a game that, despite not having any boss battles in it, is incredibly frustrating. A game that lacks health, armor, and stamina, but yet you can still get stuck and have to reset. A game that requires beginners to spend upwards of an hour just to beat a simple mission. A game that's not a roguelike or a roguelite, and has no RNG mechanics, but yet you're still at the mercy of whatever the game decides to give you. A game about precision, planning, and strategy, but it's not an RPG, and it's not turn-based. It's a game called Mudrunner. Now, I mean this with all sincerity when I say this, but this might be the original Strand type game. Not only because the terrain is incredibly hostile and unwarranted to the player, but it also seems to want to get in your own way on purpose to prevent you from doing what you're supposed to. Not only do the hostile terrain that completely disregards the fact that the player needs to traverse it in order to complete their objectives, but like I said, you will spend hours trying to navigate the single missions landscape that simply doesn't want you to succeed. From mud to dirt roads, rivers, farmlands, hills, valleys, and everything in between, this game uses a lifelike physics system and weather engine to intimidate every aspect of nature and how it would affect you in your car, and more importantly, your tires, from driving through it, around it, or all in it. From lugging around heavy-duty loads, being AAA for someone in need, and much more. If this sounds like a game for you, well, I hope it is, because I think it sounds like a game for me. It sounds like a fun game, but like in a frustrating way, but not the kind of frustrating way that makes you want to throw your controller, but frustrating in the sense of like, I want to figure you out like a puzzle. As time continues to creep forever forward and new games release, I'm sure I'll find more games to put off from playing as I bid you farewell. I'll leave you with some honorable mentions that I didn't think deserved their own segment, but I wanted to make sure got some attention, such as Star Wars Fallen Order / Jedi Survivor. I've had both of these games in my backlog for some time now, and while I've mostly seen nothing but high praise aside from the fact that they're both pretty buggy, the Souls-esque combat just makes me roll my eyes, as playing as a Jedi should feel fun to me and seamless, in my opinion, and while I understand that can't really be the case with Cal given his backstory, it's still why I stopped playing after 2 hours. Also the System Shock remake, which I got last year and played for about an hour, but I felt like the controls were just a little too clunky and unintuitive, and I understand it's a classic throwback, but I'm still a little skeptical about getting all excited for it, but I'm also feeling like I'm going to get into a fight more with the controller than I am with the enemies and the AI. There's also Darkest Dungeon 2, which from everything I hear online is super woke and lost the plot of the first game and a bunch of other random crap that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. It's genuinely jarring what I hear about this game, so I have no idea what to expect aside from disappointment, I suppose. Eternal is another one, but that's more so for its advanced movement system. I liked Doom 2016, but I wasn't a fan of the map design by and large. From what I hear about Eternal and how it pushes the player to be zipping and zooming around the map, it sounds a lot more fun, and it also leads me to believe there's a very large skill gap in between where I'm not sure where I'm going to land, which I imagine is definitely going to affect my experience. There's of course Zero Cyber, which is a 2D pixel art indie version of Stalker, and if you know what Stalker is and how it plays, I don't think I need to give you any more description beyond that. I mean, the game is just hard. The Plague Tale games are also something that seemed like everyone talks about online, singing its praises, especially the second game, but I don't know, something about it just doesn't really tickle my fancy, and I feel like I'm going to miss out on something good just because and not feeling it, essentially. The Witcher 3 also applies this category, and the same thing can be said about the Bioshock games, because I literally never touched those, and they have such lofty expectations for me going into them before ever touching them, that I worry no matter what happens, I'm going to be disappointed. And I'm not even referring to the story, because obviously I've had that thing spoiled for me for like a million times, both 1 and 3, so, you know. There's also Ghost Runner, which seems right up my alley with high-octane action and a cool cyberpunk aesthetic, but I also heard it's really hard and unforgiving. Same with the sequel. Let's see. There's also Elisa. Yeah, I don't even think I need to say anything beyond that one. But I think that's going to be due for today, guys. I hope you've all enjoyed today's episode. And if you have any thoughts or comments about the games I talked about today, please let me know in the comment section down below. Or tell me what games you've been putting off and why. Tell me about any games you have a hard time getting into. Maybe games that left you feeling disappointed or left you wanting to smash your controller. Or if there's anything else you'd like to talk about, put it in the comment section down below. Have a good day, and I'll see you all later.